Okay, June 22nd, 1940. Step into the Wayback Machine. Pearl Harbor has not yet happened. War is raging in Europe and the Far East. And Republican Representative Hamilton Fish of New York steps up to the floor of the House to give a speech. He says, Colonel Lindbergh was right when he said in one of his recent speeches, let us stop this hysterical chatter about calamity and invasion that has been running rife these last few days. It is not fitting to the people who built this nation. The only reason we're in danger of becoming involved in this war is because there are powerful elements in America who desire to take part. Let us put an end to the secret diplomatic commitments of President Roosevelt that have brought ruin and disaster to France. President Roosevelt alarmed the nation by his inflammatory Italian dagger thrust in the heart speech. Whom do we fear? Do we fear Hitler, who seems afraid to attack England over 20 miles of sea when he would have 3,000 miles to cross over here? This is preposterous. Let's stop this fear hysteria. Peacetime can direct road to Hitlerism, dictatorship, and National Socialism. If we adopt peacetime conscription, we are merely copying Nazi methods and ideology. Mr. Speaker, the Roosevelt Far Eastern policy of bluff and bluster has driven Japan into the arms of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. No one in Japan really wants war with the United States. Right. Well, we've had senators and congressmen who got it wrong before. In fact, that's from the book The Illustrious Dunderheads by Rex Stout, a complete collection of all pro-Hitler speeches given from 1933 until 1940 on the floor of the House of Representatives and the Senate. It's astonishing. But none of them actually ever wrote a letter to Mr. Hitler saying, or Hitler, I guess would be his title, saying, you know, we don't like FDR. We hate him so much we stand on the floor of the House and Senate and trash him. But, you know, if he and his friends in France or whatever ever succeed in knocking you over, don't worry. We can undo his actions. Neil McCabe is on the line with us, conservative columnist with townhall.com, editor of the Washington Mercury news site, thewashingtonmercury.com. Neil.
Here to defend the collaborators, Neil McCabe.
Yes, here to defend the traitors, to quote the New York Daily News front page. Traitors.
Well, let's go back, Tom. I think to Hamilton Fish, even on Hitlerism, and certainly Germany never posed a physical threat to the United States, for the record.
Okay, so we should not have involved ourselves in World War II?
I'm not saying that, but I mean, at the time, with the facts that Hamilton Fish had in front of him, I think that we can grant him the benefit of sincerity. And
shall I read you the various quotes from the book about people saying that, we hear all these stories about the Jews that are happening in Europe, but it's just propaganda, ignore that?
Well, I mean, Todd, FDR not only heard the stories about the Jews, he got actual intelligence reports and had a Secretary of the Treasury begging him to do something, and he did nothing.
Right. So, as the Republicans on the floor of the House and Senate were demanding he do nothing.
Well, I can't speak to that, so I'll have to defer to you.
Okay.
But, getting back to this letter that the great Tom Cotton has written to the Islamic Republic of Iran, I think that it's about time the Senate stood up for its prerogatives. We've seen in the last 2 or 3 years the traditional prerogatives and privileges and traditions of the United States Senate have been torn asunder in an effort to steam the president's agenda domestically. Now we see that the president is going to use executive action to negotiate his own treaty with Iran, and the senators are standing up saying, excuse me, I think we have a role here.
This is unprecedented. Never in the history of the United States, the opposition party spoken as if their president was no longer even president of the United States. Or just ignore that man in the White House. This has never happened.
It's unprecedented. I mean,
this has never happened.
The Hartford Convention that killed the Federalist Party. I mean, there have been times in our history when political opponents of the man in the White House have said things that maybe crossed the line, but I don't think this crossed the line.
Not with a foreign government, and not over issues like nuclear weapons.
Well, then what would be that? What are they supposed to do, Tom? I mean,
they're supposed to do what the Constitution says they're supposed to do, which is if the president is successful, and by the way, this is not just Barack Obama. This is, I mean, I realize everybody watching Fox News thinks it's just Barack Obama, but this is the P5+1. These are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council plus Germany. So we're talking Russia, we're talking Germany, we're talking France, we're talking England. This is a group of allies who are working, and I mean, Russia and China, not always the most comfortable of allies, working together to make the world a safer place. And 47 Republicans believed that their partisan political agenda, this hack right-wing political agenda of denying President Obama any kind of legacy, any kind of meaningful legacy, the agenda that Kevin McCarthy laid out back on January 20th, 2009 at the caucus room conspiracy meeting, that they're still doing this, and they're willing to risk nuclear war in order to destroy this president.
Certainly, the Senate
that is treason.
There are institutional jealousies between the different branches in our government.
That doesn't.
Not everything that Congress or the Senate does is partisan. Some of it is institutional, and we've seen the Senate tradition.
Neil, when 100% of the people signing this thing were Republicans, and 100% of the people who didn't sign it were Democrats plus 7 Republicans, you cannot say that it's not partisan.
Well, I would say that
this is the definition of partisan.
It's the Democrats have incredible party discipline. And I would suggest that...
No, the Democrats are not stupid. Neither are 7 Republicans, by the way, including the chairman of the House of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
The ranking senator in the Foreign Relations Committee and its former chairman criticized the president on Iran and then found out that the Justice Department was going to go after him. I mean, so maybe there's a little intimidation there too, Tom.
I don't think so. I realize that's the new Fox News conspiracy du jour that Menendez.
The Justice Department. The Justice Department went after Olympia Snow's husband, and then she retired, and then that court case was dropped. The Justice Department went after Republican congressman in Staten Island, and then he eventually resigned. I mean, so it's.
They went after Michelle Bachmann, and she resigned. It's not uncommon, Neil, for politicians who are committing crimes, and all these Republicans were, apparently, to resign in exchange for not being prosecuted, just like it's not uncommon for banksters to pay fines rather than going to prison. But what does that have to do with this act of treason committed by these 47 senators?
There was a Democrat criticizing the president on Iran, and days later, he found out the Justice Department was targeting him.
Menendez did not sign this letter. He is not a traitor.
A traitor, I think, is a little harsh.
Traitor.
Traitor?
Traitor.
Thom Hartmann is a combat veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan.
That does not mean that he is not. He's 37 years old, Neil. He is bumbling into this thing like some kind of bull in a china shop. When somebody is an infantry officer with a ranger tab and a veteran of 2 of our wars, at least you pause before you call him a traitor. No, I not at all. Just because somebody fought in a war does not mean that they're not willing to harm their country in exchange for partisan gain. This is purely partisan, Neil, and that makes it even worse. Well, Obama has really made things extreme. You're not going to be able to say that you can't criticize a Republican politician who happens to be a veteran. It ain't going to work. It doesn't work. Well, you don't call him a traitor right away. Maybe give it some time. I waited until the New York Daily News did yesterday. Neil McCabe, TheWashingtonMercury.com. Thanks, Neil.